Welcome to Insider, the official podcast for the City of Murfreesboro. I'm Mike Browning. Our topic, Ascension Saint Thomas Rutherford Hospital. And our guest is Gordon Ferguson, President and CEO of Ascension Saint Thomas. And Mr. Ferguson, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. Glad to be here.
Let's start with the history of Ascension Saint Thomas here in Rutherford County and your involvement.
Well, I could spend quite a bit of time talking about our history. We've been here since 1927. When the hospital was first established through a grant from the New York Commonwealth Fund. And it was a fairly small hospital at that day, back located on University Avenue and near MTSU. And that location served us well. When we started there, 1927, and made several additions to the facility and the campus over the years. But in 1986, the hospital was actually sold to a joint venture between St. Thomas Hospital and what was then Baptist Hospital in Nashville. And that was certainly a milestone for the facility. It was actually the first joint venture between a Catholic organization and a Protestant organization in healthcare. And so we made some national publications at that time. The hospital continued to flourish, and then I've actually joined the hospital in 1998. And so I've been there now for just about 23 years. I didn't follow the rule that you don't stay one place for too long, but we have just been in love with this community and with the hospital, and certainly have had a lot of great opportunities for growth over the years. Around 2000, the decision was made for us to look at relocating the hospital. There was a plan on the board to expand at the old location, but after looking at that and how we were landlocked at that site, we went to our board and to Ascension and were able to buy the acreage from the city of Murfreesboro, what is now Medical Center Parkway. Back then, it was a two-lane road going up over the interstate. There was no Medical Center Parkway interchange. And our deal was that the city would help with the infrastructure and the state would put a new interchange called Medical Center Parkway. All that work was done. It took a few years. And then the question became, well, we've got Medical Center Parkway, but we have no medical center. And so we really turned up the activity and, as I said, received the approval to build a new hospital on what was then a greenfield.
Well, given the prosperity and the success of Medical Center Parkway, you must look back at that decision strategically as one very favorable.
Yes. We had a good feeling about the location. I think we paid $70,000 an acre back then. The property was about $6 million. Now I think it's probably $1 million an acre, but it was the right thing for our healthcare ministry because we want to continue to grow with the community. But I think it did spur a lot of economic development that is now just flourishing with a lot of retail and residential, and we were just glad to be a part of that aspect of our history here.
How have caregivers and administrators at the hospital dealt with COVID and the recovery process, and then ways that that's really changed healthcare?
You know, it has been a difficult year and a half now. Ironically, the COVID pandemic hit right when we were approaching the end of our expansion project where we added 72 beds. And I remember when we were hearing about the potential impacts of COVID and the increase in hospitalization, we were trying to do everything we could to finish up the the project so that we'd have the additional beds. And looking back on it now, we're glad that that all worked out that way. In terms of how it's changed our way of delivering care, there have been some very difficult parts about it, but some positive things. On the challenge, I will tell you that I think as we're coming out of the pandemic now, our staff is tired. Our physicians certainly put in a lot of long hours. Our nurses and other support personnel, respiratory therapists, it was a lot to learn to put on a lot of more protective gear, and just the sheer number of really sick patients. I think at one time our COVID population within the hospital was about 141. Compare that to today, where I think we've got 2 COVID positive patients in our hospital.
One of the concerns at that time was reaching the capacity or overcapacity of the hospital. How close did you come to that?
We did reach our full 358 beds, and part of that was because our COVID patients tended to stay longer in the hospital. Our average length of stay typically is about 4 days. When we looked at our COVID patients, they were staying around an average of 10 days. So we were not able to get that throughput that we normally get without that aspect. On the positive side, though, we did come up with some neat learning aspects, particularly in the area of telemedicine. Telemedicine has been around for a while. We've got a telestroke program, but we were not seeing a lot of adoption of that technology on the outpatient side, where instead of going to your physician's office or going to the ER, you could have that virtual visit. And we have seen an uptick in that in our Ascension Medical Group locations. And we have also seen a fairly significant reduction in our ER volumes. Now, they are coming up to some degree, but we were not where we were pre-COVID. And frankly, it's not a bad thing for patients to get the right level of care in the right location. And so some patients that may have come to our ER in the past, I think, are now maybe going to an urgent care clinic or doing a virtual visit.
How much of telemedicine really has to do with the acceptance of the patients themselves? I would think you could almost do an annual checkup as long as you had your blood work, but it's the acceptance of it.
That's correct. And I think as you can imagine, I think with our younger population, they really like it a whole lot better, and in fact, just do it on their telephone or their cell phone. I think with the older population, the technology is maybe a little bit more difficult for acceptance, but we're seeing a good number of virtual visits.
How concerned are you now? It's in the news heavily out of India with the variants of COVID, and Delta is spreading, I think, fairly rapidly in some places. So what are you expecting here, and what are your fears, I guess?
We are hoping that we will not see the surge that we saw back last year and the beginning of this year. What I have read and understand is that those that have been vaccinated will have a good level of protection against this Delta variant. Those that have not been vaccinated, and I think particularly the younger population, I think are suspect to getting this, the potential of getting this variant. And that's why we continue to make a plea to our staff at the hospital and to our community to get the vaccination. At the hospital, I believe we ended up doing about 30,000 vaccinations, and we so appreciate the staff that came in and helped us set that program up. We received a good number of compliments about the efficiency of how easy it was to come in, get the vaccination, and leave. But there still are a good number of individuals in our community that are not vaccinated, and we would just, particularly with the news about this Delta variant, that we'd love to see more people continue to get vaccinated.
I know some people have been fearful of maybe what impact it might have or the drawbacks of the vaccine, but then more and more people have done it and they seem to be fine, so
Yes.
there's no reason not to do it.
That's my opinion. That's what we hear from our physicians. And again, when you consider maybe some of the implications that we have heard, they're minor compared to the number of individuals across the country and the world that have been vaccinated.
There's been news at Ascension Saint Thomas of a new cardiac surgery program. What does that mean for the community here in Murfreesboro?
This really has been a long-term vision of ours. Cardiac surgery is certainly a complicated procedure, but it's one that's been well tested and shown to be very effective in the treatment of heart disease. For our community, what this means is that if you needed this procedure today, you would need to go into Nashville for that surgery. With our cardiology group here, St. Thomas Heart, we felt the time was right to approach the state for a certificate of need approval for Rutherford to be able to do this procedure at our campus. And so we submitted the application. We were very grateful to the individuals, the leaders, and others that wrote letters of support for our application. And we were not opposed, and it was a unanimous vote just last week for us to move forward. So we will be recruiting for two very well-trained cardiovascular surgeons, and we've got the capacity within our operating room suite and within the critical care unit to do the procedure. It's about a $5.6 million commitment for equipment, and then we'll certainly be adding additional staff that will be trained to do this procedure. But we're very excited to do this. We do a lot of interventional cardiac procedures today, and but not everybody is appropriate for that procedure. Some patients need to go forward with the more invasive open heart surgery.
So is it right to say that this cardiac unit will mainly be for scheduled type procedures? Obviously you deal with heart attacks and things like
True.
that at the hospital.
Yes.
This will be more for scheduled.
A lot will be scheduled. However, there'll be some who come in a very acute stage of heart disease that again, if the interventional procedure does not apply, then they would be taken straight onto surgery. And we had one of our local community leaders who had that very situation where he was brought to our hospital and it was determined that he needed open heart surgery and then was rushed to St. Thomas West and was taken care of and is doing very well today. So yes, there are instances where it is considered a very urgent procedure.
I assume this was probably several years in the making with the certification process. Are there other things like that you're working on for the future?
There are several things. We have recently brought in some additional neurosurgeons that will be joining the Howell Allen group here with our existing neurosurgeons, Dr. George Lynn and Mike Moran. We are in the planning stages for a level 2 trauma designation. This is something that we have, again, been looking at for a few years and have brought in 4 board-certified trauma surgeons. We've still got a few pieces to put together in the puzzle to launch this program, but it would be great for us to maybe come back and share more information about that when we're closer to implementation. But we're excited about that. There's the only other level 2 facility in Middle Tennessee is Skyline up in the north side of Nashville, and it's just given where we are relative to I-24. We're the largest hospital between Nashville and Chattanooga, and we just felt that in order for us to serve this community, this would be the right thing to do. And it's a huge investment we're making, again, in terms of personnel and equipment. But again, we feel that it's the right thing to do.
So that's exciting news. I guess you answered partly my follow-up question would be if we don't have a level 2 now, then people have to go to Nashville.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yeah, Nashville or Chattanooga.
And then we've also heard about a new neighborhood hospital because the Blackman area or west of I-24 is growing so rapidly. Share that with us.
Last August, we received another certificate of need approval to build what we're calling a neighborhood hospital. And this will be the first of its kind in the state of Tennessee. As part of Ascension, we've got other neighborhood hospitals in states like Wisconsin, Texas, Indiana. But this facility will be located just south of 840 on Veterans Parkway in the West Lawn community. It will be a 2-level facility. On the ground level, there'll be a full-fledged emergency room with 8 treatment rooms, and then adjacent to that will be an 8-bed inpatient facility, all one structure. And then on the second level, which is sheltered space right now, we're hoping to build out some clinic space there. But we are working with our architects right now. Our current timeline is that we would be breaking ground in October, and then that the building would be complete fall of 2022. So it's an exciting project for us. It will actually be located adjacent to a new building that's being constructed by Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance. And in that building, we will have a joint venture surgery center that will be devoted to outpatient orthopedic procedures. And that project is just coming out of the ground now. And then we will be located adjacent to a future development being put up by Murfreesboro Medical Clinic. So in that Shores Road and Veterans Parkway area, we'll have a kind of a small medical campus there to take care of that growing portion of our population.
Well, you can't hear about all of these projects and things you're doing and not know that you're committed and dedicated to this community.
We are.
You know, this
Yes.
is something that you want to serve this community with.
It is, and it's a privilege to do that. As I mentioned, we've been here since 1927, and we are very grateful to our parent company, Ascension, for the capital investment that's been made in our new facility and in other outpatient facilities that really we're trying to get the healthcare placed where it's most convenient. You know, there's a lot of expectations about access, and we want geographically to be accessible, but also from a cost perspective, we want care to be provided in the most cost-effective setting.
Well, Gordon, thanks for being with us. Thanks for your commitment to our community.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
Appreciate your time. For more information on Ascension Saint Thomas, visit ascension.org. We've been highlighting Ascension Saint Thomas Rutherford Hospital, originating this podcast from City Hall. Thanks for listening to The Insider via Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Amazon Music Audible. You can also watch this Insider podcast on YouTube. Our producer is Michael Nevels. For more information on the fast-growing city of Murfreesboro, visit www.murfreesborotn.gov. Insider is the official podcast for the city of Murfreesboro. Until next time, I'm Mike Browning. Thanks a lot for joining us.